Welcome back to season 3 of What, Why, God. And in this season, as you may know, we are talking about the testimonies of God's people through his timeless truth and how you can see his thread through their lives in different ways. And so today I have with me Nancy Kornegay, and she is one of our children's ministers here at First Colony Church. And she and I had been talking about getting her on to do this for some time because she just has such a great way about her, and obviously working with children, she's going to be very personable. And she talks a lot about how she likes to have conversations with people about God, but she won't debate people. And I love that. We were going to talk a little bit about that, but God had a different plan for this season. And so Nancy went through a, what do you call it? A
medical crisis.
Medical crisis, yes, a medical health crisis. And it's actually an ongoing medical health crisis. And she was telling me about this situation. I thought, we need to talk about that. And she had actually already made up her mind that that's what she was going to talk about today. So why don't we just kind of start right there. Give me a little bit of a synopsis on what happened.
Well, on November of last year, on the 9th, I had the worst headache that I have ever had. And it was significant enough that I stopped what I was doing. I looked at my husband and I said, I think I'm having a stroke. And we immediately got up and we went to urgent care, which they treated me for a migraine. I have a history of migraines. They gave me 2 Tylenol and some Phenergan because I was nauseous and sent me on my way. And that was it. So I was supposed to be leaving that day for a girls' weekend with my high school buddies. I already had the car packed and everything, but I decided, you know what, I just feel lousy. I'm going to stay the night at home. However, the next morning I got up, I drove myself to College Station. We had the weekend, we met with family, we played games, went out to eat, and because my head was hurting
so all
the whole
this time, your head was hurting?
The whole time.
Yeah.
So since my head was hurting the whole time, I said, let me drive. I would like to be the driver, which turns out to have been, there was some providence, someone taking care of us. So anyway, I get up, it's time to leave on Sunday. One of the girls is leaving really early, so I'm up and I had to move my car, and my friend Cindy, we were at her house. She's like, you look like you're really tired. And I I am, but I'm good. I'm going to drive home. Dale will be home later today. And she's like, why don't you just take a little nap? And I was like, oh, okay. 3 hours later, I woke up from my little nap, and I came out, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to pack my stuff and head out now. And she said, no, you don't look good. She's like, why don't you have a seat? Let's get some food in you. Let's get you hydrated. She's a nurse. And so she was doing all the nurse things.
Thank God for nurses.
Yes. And so that's what I did. I had some lunch, I hydrated, we sat and talked for about 3 hours. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to head home now because Dale's going to be home when I get there. And she's like, all right. But even when I drove home, she called halfway through. Just wanted to make sure. Are you on the road? Is everything good? Do you need any assistance? And I was good. I got home. I'm not sure. I think maybe I had dinner with Dale. He had beat me home. But by like 6:30, I was in bed again. So a lot of sleeping. I woke up 3 in the morning. I typed a message on my chart to my primary doctor. I set an appointment for urgent care again. This whole time I had been trying to get into my primary doctor. And so I went to urgent care, and they said, there is nothing we can do for you. And I'm like, nothing? And they're like, nothing. I said, okay. They said, you need to make an appointment with a neurologist. And I walked out the door, probably in tears, and called the neurologist I'd seen once many years ago, and he was no longer in practice.
Oh, no.
Couldn't get into a neurologist till the December 21st. And I went home. And later that day, I got a call from my doctor, said, hey, tomorrow morning I have an opening. Do you want it? I'm like, of course I want it. Within 5 minutes of her, she was sending me off to get a CAT scan, which took a few hours and a little pleading, but I did get it.
So this was the day before you were going to have an appointment. You went and got a CAT scan.
No, this is
on her
She said
appointment
on
day.
Tuesday morning,
Oh,
you
first
can
thing.
come to see me.
Okay.
So on Tuesday morning, I went to see her. Then I had a CAT scan later that day. And you know it's important when the doctor calls you.
Yeah.
So I had just gotten home from the CT scan and she called and said, I'm going to need you to make your way to the ER as quickly as possible. You have a subarachnoid brain hemorrhage. So I thought, all right, what's the quickest way to get there? I got in my car. I drove myself. ER staff was alarmed that I had done that. And then I said, well, I've been driving all weekend, which then they were even like,
Even more alarmed.
more alarmed, more
Yeah.
shocked.
Yeah.
And so Dale was on the other side of town. He had a new job that he started the day before. He's scurrying out the door, but it took him an hour to get there. They've started all the tests, all the things that you think, except very calm. Tons of people are in there. That terminology, subarachnoid brain hemorrhage, gets people's attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wound up staying in the hospital for several days. There were testing going on, lots of testing going on. But it wasn't until, I guess I went in on Tuesday. On Wednesday, they were going to do a cranial angiogram. And the doctor that was the neurosurgeon came in and he said, let's see, I wrote it down. I think I am the 23% that actually has this event, makes it to the hospital, goes home without a deficit. So I'm one of 23. Out of the rest of them, about 27% never make it to the hospital. And around 50% are the ones that live the rest of their lives in a nursing home. That got my attention.
Yeah.
That's when I realized
Yeah.
the seriousness.
Yeah. It's a 70, almost 80% chance of you not
Being here,
being here.
living life.
Yeah. And living a life. That's just,
cool.
that's, so
Staggering, right?
I just, and she's sitting here with us today. So let that sink in. And it's a beautiful story. So it's crazy because so then you're realizing during all of this how serious it was.
Yes.
And that you had to be vulnerable because there's going to be a little bit of a process to get yourself back up to what you would most people would consider normal, or at least somewhere around normal speed, and that's unusual for her, by the way. She's got to do a million things all the time. So tell me, how did that come about?
Well, I notified my friends what was going on, but just a close group. And I didn't really need people there because my blood pressure would go up if there was a lot of talking, any kind of interaction.
Yeah, I remember hearing about
very
that.
few people
Yeah.
came, but I knew that I needed more. And I needed to be willing to be vulnerable and authentic and say, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And so I had it announced at church. I had it announced on the prayer list. I even put it on Facebook and just said, hey, this is what's going on. I need your prayers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt that. I felt, there were times where my nerves were like craziness. And then I would have to remember, I don't have to obsess about this. This doesn't help me. This is just the opposite of what I need.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to rest in the fact that I had people doing the most important part, which was to pray, to beseech God that I would have healing, that I would have continued healing. Those 5 days that I was in the hospital, I was there because the first 10 days after a brain event like that, you're more likely to have a full-out stroke.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they
Makes
literally were
sense.
watching me to wait and see if I was going to have a stroke. That's a little stressful.
Yeah.
So
Just the knowledge alone can stress you
Right.
out. Yeah.
Right. So even now, I will meet somebody at church that I don't know. I was in the parking lot trying to talk to one friend, and the other person, I didn't know. They introduced us, and they're like, wait, I've heard that name before. And then it clicked. They went, we have been praying for you daily. I mean, and this is 4 months down the road.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
are still remaining faithful to
Yeah.
pray for me.
Yeah.
And it's humbling, incredibly humbling. I think the other thing that happened is because of my vulnerability, the community of the church stepped up, and it looked different. And so I had someone send me flowers. I had some people bring food. I had people just drop presents off, at the door. One day I was like, hey, Dale, there's somebody at the door. And he runs and he's like, oh, it's a gift for you. It's like, okay, what's in there? I had someone bring me a quilt. It's someone that I've known since before we had babies, and which is a long time ago. And she asked if she could come by the house, because again, I wasn't having a lot of people because of the stress on my body. And she came in and she said, I know how much you love quilts, and so I've been making this one for you. And I finished it on Sunday. I mean, talk about the timing
Yes,
of it.
yes.
And so she came, and we had a lovely visit. I had teenagers from our church came, help wrap Christmas gifts and put up Christmas decorations. I had boys come and take all the decorations out of the attic. We had family coming, and I couldn't do any of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dale, my husband, has been phenomenal in all of this. And he's taken on all the cooking, all the cleaning, even
Right.
now. And, having those teens come and help us was also helping him.
Yeah.
So it was helping
Yeah.
our family and
Yeah.
supporting
Yeah.
our family.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had, I had someone gift me with loops, which if you have a noise sensitivity, which I now have, and I have a light sensitivity, so boo those lights. But but on a Wednesday night, I was teaching, and someone walked up to me and said, "Oh, I need you to have this before class. We brought you something." And I open it, and it was these loops, which are, little earplugs that allow you to still hear, have a conversation,
Right.
but not all of the background
But
noise.
mutes all the background. And they're expensive too, right? I remember you telling me about that, and you were like,
yeah,
"Oh,
that
I
was a
go to
very
afford
expensive
these."
gift. And I just, and I even had gone on the website, but because I have a light sensitivity and sensitivity with screens, there were too many choices, too many this, too many that. And so I had just tucked it away and thought I'll have to deal with that later. And so then having that as a
Yeah, I mean,
surprise,
you're
as a gift.
really seeing the importance of community, which is kind of a little bit about what we were talking about, how the church just kind of showed up.
Yeah.
And in so many ways, in prayers and gifts, and not just helping you, but helping your husband,
Right.
and just being there. And you don't realize the impact that God can have, in your life, because you think, well, I'm going to church and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, until something like this happens. Sometimes you're really realizing that.
Right. Yeah, it definitely sheds a light on it. And, I said this earlier, but it's humbling.
Yeah.
It's humbling to be on that receiving end.
Yeah.
But when you're at a point where you just can't,
Yeah.
you literally cannot get up and do what you need to do.
Yeah.
I mean, like I had a friend that babysat me one day because Dale had to be out of town. I
Yeah.
mean, that's where I was at. Just
Yeah.
needing to have someone present in case something went wrong.
So it kind of moves into the next part of it. I mean, a lot of people talk about surrendering your life to God, but I mean, you really literally had to do that. You had to surrender and say, okay, God, I can't do this, but you are surrounding me with people that are offering me, and I'm not going to be the person, like we all do it. We kind of say, no, I got it. But you realize, you needed your community, you knew you were completely vulnerable, but there's that last part, that all of that means then that you had to actually surrender.
Yes, and so this year during Lent season, I'm listening to a podcast, and the theme is surrender. And so kind of my mantra, as I've gone through it, it's part of it. They talk about it every day, different times that people have had to surrender, how they surrendered, what that looks like. And but the phrase, Jesus, I surrender myself to you. And that's how it started. And then as we progressed a few weeks in, it's Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything. And so even this morning before we did this, that's what I was saying. Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything. And what's interesting about that is I made a commitment to God. I gave my life to God when I was 12, many years ago. And since that time, I've always followed his ways. There have been challenges along the way. There have been times when I was angry with God, but I've known who he is. So reading those words, listening to those words, saying those words, I was surprised the impact they had on me, because it was like, wait a minute, you're doing life all the time and you're doing a good job, but are you really thinking about surrendering every part of your life?
Yeah.
So then the prayer came of, help me to see what I'm not surrendering. Help me to be willing to go there, to look at the cobwebs and clean them out of my heart or my mind, so that I can be your servant, fully your servant.
I love that. I do think, I can't speak for men, but I can speak for women, in that we try to control a lot of our surroundings. We
Not us.
we hold on and say, okay, I got this, I can do this, because we're multitaskers. We're I can do this, and this, and this, and there's a beauty in the fact that men will say oftentimes, no, I'm doing this right now, and they will let whatever else needs to be set aside. But we women, we tend to be I'm going to take care of all of that, and so I love the fact that you're learning that surrender and how important it is. And I really want you to hear that today, that God asks us to be vulnerable for him. He asks us to be a part of the community of God. And more importantly, he asks us to surrender to him. Because when we try to control it, it just makes things difficult.
Yeah,
right?
it's a tug of war.
Exactly.
It's a tug of war.
And I love what he's been doing on all of this. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I so appreciate it. Do you have a scripture or something you'd like to share with everybody?
Well, there were a lot of things that I thought about. I will say that I have felt very loved through all of this, and just the simple passage that God is love, and really feeling that and knowing that. And then I have a quote that's from a famous preacher, Charles Spurgeon, and it says, "I have learned to kiss the wave that threw me against the rock of ages." So in other words, embracing the wounds, embracing the challenges, embracing medical crisis, so that the turmoil, knowing that it could throw me against God.
Yeah.
And if I'm willing to do that instead of pulling away
Yeah,
from
because
him, but go into his embrace.
that reminds us of our fragility.
Yes.
Because we aren't able to do it, but God is, and God can handle it. And that's a great quote to remind us of that you will be thrown against the rocks,
Right.
but you would prefer to be thrown against the rock of ages.
Yes.
I love that. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I really hope that this spoke to you today. And if you know of somebody who is going through a crisis, this is really the story for them to hear, and to know that God is always there. He is your firm foundation, and the people of God want to be there with you as well. And if you surrender it to God, he will take over, and he will lead you in the way that he has poured out for you and sent out for you. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you on our next episode.